Good afternoon, Bradley. How are you?
I'm well. How are you, Taria?
I'm doing well, thank you. Is that seersucker? That's not very nice.
How do you?
It's just one of those things. It's so distinctive and summery. It's very nice.
I can't believe you actually know what that's called.
Sorry.
I have no
Used
know.
to be a different girl back in the day. All right, so anyway. Sorry. All right, so with that said, thank you so much. I was just letting everybody know that while we wait for a few more folks to kind of trickle in, just to make sure that they're familiar with the functions of Zoom, so the Q&A function and the chat function. I remember usually the chat function is usually confusing. You just want to make sure folks that are here in Bradley that your settings are set to communicate with the attendees and presenter, or panelists, just so you can kind of make a decision as to who sees what you type, if there are any questions or what have you. And I know sometimes you put your contact information, so just pay attention to that little detail. So I guess we'll get started shortly. It looks like it's 4 o'clock on the dot, so if we just can wait a minute or two, and then we'll get started. Question mark?
Sounds good. So I'm going to start sharing the screen now
Okay, great.
so that everything's ready. It looks like it's right here.
I'll also say this verbally and I'll type it in. So presentations and accessories or resources will be provided upon the completion of the course. So, and I'll also type that in the chat box just so everyone can see, but I'm sure I'll have to answer that a few more times. So, are you recording this, Bradley?
Yes. Should I not
Okay.
do that? Should
No,
I
you
not?
can. You can. I was just like, I don't normally record, so I was like, oh no.
I'm worried my computer's going to run out of memory and crash the whole presentation, but let's
Well,
just
yeah,
hope
that's
not.
why I kind of don't record, but it's all good. So whatever you like. All right, so I'm gonna mute and I'll check back in just maybe a minute or so, and then I guess we can go ahead and get started.
All right, you'll tell me when to get started, and then we will.
Okay, it looks like we have some folks here, and I'm sure a few will be trickling in, as I said. So my name's Taria. I'm with the Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce, along with NYC Business Solutions. Hello, Barbara. And also SBS, which is better known as the Department of Small Business Services. So basically what we do in a nutshell is support small business owners and help their businesses to grow. Today you're participating in the Small Business Partnership webinar. It's going to be conducted by Bradley Bailyn. He conducts all of our legal courses for us in addition to one-on-one consultations. So he does a number of things for the Solutions Center. So we're very grateful to have him. You guys are in great hands today. He's very knowledgeable, and feel free to ask any questions, I guess, if it's within his capacity. All right, so with that said, the floor is all yours, Bradley, and thank you so much again.
Thank you, Taria. It's my pleasure. My name is Bradley Bailyn. I'm a small business attorney. I do a lot of corporate and securities work, and this is one of my favorite topics to talk about, small business partnerships in New York City and what you need to know. Before we begin, I'm just going to give you a heads up ahead of time that first of all, Zoom makes things appear and disappear. There's a microphone over my head that you cannot see, but sometimes it randomly appears if I lean forward, and then people are like, what's that black cloud over your head? I don't normally walk around with a black cloud over my head, even though I'm an attorney, and some people think I do. It's just Zoom making my microphone appear and disappear. Second, the kids might get home in an hour or so, and so if you hear a yell, you'll know what that is, but I'll try to keep it as quiet as I possibly can for you. So, all right, if you have questions, you can type them into the chat box. I'll answer them as we go. If you have something complicated or personal that you want to talk about, my contact information is in the presentation, which Turia will send to everybody afterwards. And you can go ahead and reach out to me. I don't charge anything for a consultation. So if that's what you want to do, this is pretty dense material that we're going to cover. So you can go right ahead. All right, let's roll. All right, so this is a little bit about me. Again, my name is Brad Bailyn. I'm a small business lawyer. I do a lot of things. In this particular case, the corporate and securities aspect of what I do is going to be the central focus. All right, this presentation is going to cover almost all of the ways that two people or companies can work together with each other. It's pretty lengthy, and I'm going to try to jump over some things so that we cover at least a little bit all of the different things you could do, because I want you to be aware of them. I don't need you to be an expert on all these things, but I just want you to know what exists, because you may choose the wrong structure just because no one told you what you could have done, and then for the rest of your life be sorry. So that's my goal, is for you to have a good sense of what's going on. Yeah, I'd be happy to share the recording as long as Turia gives me permission to do so. I'm responding to Tari's question. So we need to run it by Turia. If Turia says that it's okay with SBS, then I will be happy to release it. You can definitely have a copy of the presentation if you'd like it. All right. All right, so our structure, part one, overview of partnership structures used in New York, and part two, ways in which businesses can partner with each other. So we're going to talk about how individuals can partner, and then how businesses can partner with each other. What this presentation is going to cover will be the kinds of partnerships that are recognized in New York, how you form a partnership, how can my business collaborate or partner with other businesses? How do I exit or terminate a partnership? And what are some additional ways a partnership structure can be used? Now, let me lead by saying this. Technically, a partnership, the only form of partnership is a partnership. Everything else is a different structure. But a lot of times people use words that they don't quite understand. And so I labeled the class partnerships, and we're going to talk about strict statutory partnerships, but I'm also going to cover the things that almost everybody does when they form a partnership, which is limited liability companies and corporations, because to not cover that, I feel like would leave you without things that you really want to know. Okay, sorry, I just had to stop for a minute to read the question, read the commentary. What is a partnership? All right, the definition of a partnership is a voluntary association of two or more people or entities who jointly own and carry on a business for profit. And I've got some examples here of what that is. Partners in a law firm who work together to provide legal services. For example, Ben and Jerry decide to start an ice cream business, or two brothers decide to start a car repair business. So basically, when you have two or more people or companies who try to make a profit by doing a business together, then you've got a partnership. Now, the partnership structure generally carries fewer legal requirements than the more formal business structures, such as a corporation. That's good and bad. Basically, you and I can form a partnership today, right? There's no legal paperwork required. The two of us can just be having an ice cream somewhere, and we can say, this is so good. We should make our own ice cream. I can sell ice cream. And then you say, oh, well, I can make ice cream and I can make it even better than this. We've got a family recipe. And I say, oh, good, let's go home right now and do it. And so we go and we do it, and everybody buys it, and we're written up in the press. People are taking pictures of it, and all of a sudden, we say, this is great. Let's share in a commercial kitchen. Let's rent space in a commercial kitchen, and let's make a lot of these ice creams. And so we make the ice creams, and people buy it. And at no point do we think about making a partnership agreement or forming an LLC or anything like that. We just go into business together. And what I just described is what most typically happens. It's the worst possible thing that you can do from a legal standpoint, but it's the simplest thing. It's the cheapest thing. And as a practical matter, it's what a lot of people do. And it lands them in the lawyer's office sooner or later, because it's completely not structured in any way. It's just an accident waiting to happen. Okay, so all right, so let's see what we've got next here. And so we're going to talk about alternatives to just running out and going into business together. So, all right, so what are the basic principles of a partnership? Partnerships are governed by state law, so the laws vary depending on the state. People will come to me and they'll say, well, we never formed a partnership agreement, but Joe is working for a competitor. He's a partner in a competing firm at the same time that he's a partner in our firm. Can we throw him out of the partnership? Can we sue him? What can we do? And that always turns on what state we're dealing with. And that determines what laws we have, because it's the state that determines the laws that deal with partnerships, not the federal government. So foreign partnerships, that is partnerships formed in other states or countries, can usually do business in New York as long as they comply with certain requirements. And you can form a partnership without any formal, or this is what we just talked about, you can form a partnership without any filings, but it's certainly not a good idea to do it without even having a partnership agreement. And partnerships are business entities that have tax filing requirements that just like anybody else does. So if you decide to do the most basic thing you can do other than a sole proprietorship and form a partnership, what kinds of partnerships exist? Let me just briefly cover that, and then we're going to jump into what structure should I use. Basically, there's three kinds of partnerships that you can have. You can have a general partnership. That means you've got two or more people, everybody actively manages the business, and everybody has unlimited liability, and everybody has the ability to make the other person liable. So who likes this? People with no money like this. Usually there's a money person, there's like a salesperson, and there's a technical person, and there's a money person. It's the partners. And everybody's trying to spend the money person's money. And the money person is afraid of liability. A lot of times they put their house down as collateral. They have good credit. And there's usually a lot of fighting between the money person and the other people over liability. And it's usually the money person who wants the partnership agreement and all this other stuff. But assuming everyone has an active role in managing the business, then you've got a general partnership, which is the most simple kind of partnership. You can also have an investment partnership known as a limited partnership. In a limited partnership, you have one person who's the big shot, who makes all the decisions and does the analysis. And then you've got investors. Sometimes people do limited partnerships to invest in real estate, right? You've got one person who's a general contractor who goes out and buys the property from the broker, who's got the investor's money, who handles the renovation, and then the broker goes and sells the stuff. So the broker is operating in an island. The broker's not part of the partnership. You've got the contractor who's the general partner who's managing the whole thing. And then you've got 5 limited partners who each put in $50,000, and they're only liable up to their $50,000 investment. But you have to be careful, because that is considered a security when you're taking investors who are not active partners, and you can violate the securities law very easily and get yourself in a lot of trouble when your friend Harry has $70,000 in the bank and he puts $50,000 into your real estate flipping business, and you lose it. And then Harry goes to the Securities and Exchange Commission and says you lied to him and ripped him off, because people get really upset when they lose their life savings. So you got to be really careful when you form a limited partnership, when you take investors. You don't need to be so careful when it's every man or woman for themselves. But when you've got investors, you need to talk to the lawyer, because you can have significant liability. All right, looks like we have a question. What's up? What about a husband and wife who start an e-commerce selling online business? Well, husband and wife, depending on what state you're in, there are certain rules about ownership of property as husband and wife, who owns what, and it depends on where the money came from and if you have a prenuptial agreement and other things. But setting all of the marital rights aside, your partner is like any other group of partners, and you can both join a limited liability company. You can both be partners in a corporation. You can both be general partners. One can be a limited partner and one can be a general partner. So husband and wife are two different people, and when you form a business entity, the fact that you're husband and wife isn't relevant in regard to your ability to be standard partners. Your ownership is affected by your marital rights, but unless there's a very specific situation, I'm not going to talk about that here, because that's really going to go down a rabbit hole of family law, which, for the purposes of time, we've got a long enough presentation as it is. All right. So, but thank you, Barbara, for the question. I appreciate it. If you have something more specific you want to talk about, you can reach out to me and I'd be happy to talk about it with you. So, okay. So what structure should I use for my business? That's the most common question that I get is, what should I do, Bradley? All these wonderful things exist. I just need you to tell me, what should I do? And my response to people usually is, what do you want to do? Tell me what you want to do in terms of your vision for the business, and then I'll tell you what structure you should use. The short answer usually is an LLC, unless you're planning to be raising a substantial amount of capital in the next 6 to 12 months, in which case you should probably form a Delaware corporation. That's the short answer, but let's talk about how to address this question. What structure should I use for my business? The answer depends on the facts and circumstances of a particular business. As we talked about, the most common structure for small businesses is the LLC, because it's a lot simpler and a lot less costly to operate an LLC than it is to operate a corporation. If you don't properly operate your LLC, what happens? Personal liability. That's what happens if you don't properly operate your LLC. What happens if you don't properly operate your corporation? Personal liability. That's what happens when you don't properly operate your corporation. Therefore, since the purpose of a limited liability company and a corporation is to avoid personal liability, you don't want to form a more complicated business structure than you need, because it's going to be difficult for you to comply with the legal requirements of avoiding personal liability when operating this thing. So corporations are typically used when you've got investors who are going to need multiple classes of stock and that kind of thing. But if you've just got two people and you plan to make a few $100,000 and that's that, then you're almost definitely going to form an LLC. And you can form an LLC and then go ahead and form a corporation later when someone's ready to write a check for $1 million, or when you've got a few accredited investors who are going to get involved. So you can keep things simple for yourself. So, okay. And then there's some notes here about structuring your business. Now, something you need to keep in mind is that taxes are constantly changing and taxes are very complicated. And it's the CPA who deals with tax issues, and usually not just any CPA, but a small business CPA is usually the one who deals with this kind of thing. So when it comes down to tax questions, unless it's something really simple, normally I will refer you to a CPA, because you might have a situation where you're going to have an LLC as a holding company, and then the LLC may own 5 more LLCs because you've got, you're doing real estate projects, and you're going to have an LLC for each property that you're flipping or each property that you're buying and renovating and renting out. And so you may have an LLC that owns 5 LLCs and dealing with pass-through tax structures and multi-levels. And it sounds hard. It's not that bad, but you just need someone who knows this stuff. And so generally, you're going to go to the small business CPA for this kind of thing. All right, let's see what the question is. On that note, for an e-commerce selling online business in New York City, what is needed to be legal? A seller's permit, business license, LLC, et cetera, or all of the above? There's what you do. This is how I answer those questions for people. I Google New York City license requirements, and the city of New York has a website where it tells you for many, many common businesses what licenses and permits are going to be required. So, I don't remember exactly what it's called, but it's probably #1 on Google when you search for keywords like that. And then you enter in e-commerce business, and it's going to tell you, it's going to ask you questions like, are you selling from a storefront? Are you selling at flea markets? Are you selling online? What kind of items are you selling? And after it goes through that, then it's going to tell you, you need a tax collector's certificate. You need a license from Small Business Affairs, which you probably don't. I'm sorry, Consumer Affairs, which you probably don't. If you're going to have a store, you may need a license. So it'll go through with you what kind of license you need, but the main thing you're going to need is permission to collect sales tax if you're selling retail. So probably the tax authority is the main license that you're going to need when you're doing an e-commerce business and selling online. But again, you can, an LLC is not a license. An LLC is just something you form to protect yourself. Again, you can contact me afterwards if you want to talk more about your specific requirements, but the city's website is where I would start on this. All right. Okay, let me dismiss this because I answered. All right, another question. How do business owners protect themselves from losing everything if someone sues the business? Is there insurance that's taken out for this? Okay, good question. There's 2 ways. The first way is by forming a business structure, such as a LLC or a corporation. So that's the first way that you can do it, and that will protect you against contractual liability. Insurance you're going to use usually for negligence. There's something called a tort in the law, which means when you do something wrong to someone for which the law provides a financial remedy, such as mopping the floor and having the floor be very slippery, and then someone comes into the shop and they fall down and get hurt. For something like that, having an LLC may not protect you so well. You may need insurance to cover you against things like that, professional malpractice and professional liability for doctors, lawyers, CPAs, architects, engineers. That kind of thing also requires insurance because you can't deal with that so well in the form of an LLC. But the LLCs and corporations and these kind of business structures, they typically provide protection for contractual liability and to some degree for tort liability too. But it depends on the tort. So really it's better to have an insurance policy if you can potentially get sued for a lot of money. A lot of people are doing things like selling art on eBay. Like there's just no reason to buy insurance for that because what are you going to get sued for? Someone is going to break a picture frame over their husband's head. Like you're probably not going to get sued for that. But if you're selling nutritional supplements that you're making in your backyard, then you may want to have some kind of insurance policy because someone can have an asthma attack or someone can have an allergy and then say that you caused that. So when you've got a big money risk like that, you're going to want to have insurance in addition to having their contract be with some form of corporate entity other than yourself. Lastly, it's worth considering that you want to have a contract if you can to limit your liability. They can sign a contract waiving a lot of their rights, shortening their time to sue for this or that. So that's something you can do. And you may want to protect yourself personally by either not having much money to begin with so that you can just file bankruptcy on any lawsuit that's brought against you personally, or if you do have assets, potentially transferring them into someone else's name or transferring them into an irrevocable trust so that those assets are not in your name. And then if you get sued, you can go ahead and settle the judgment because it's uncollectible, or you can go ahead and file bankruptcy to kill off the lawsuit or the judgment. So, those are all the possible ways to protect yourself from personal liability. So, all right. Also, I just remembered something that I forgot to cover earlier when I was talking about the 3 forms of partnerships. We talked about general partnerships, limited partnerships. There's also joint ventures, which is a partnership between companies. But we'll talk about that later. I just remembered that I said 3 things and I wanted to cover all 3 of those things. All right. A note on partnerships. Partnership, okay, we just talked about this. They're easy to start, but they run into trouble fast. Partners don't get along with each other. Usually you're better off having a bunch of trusted employees than you are having partners. It's not a bad idea to run a credit check on people before you become a partner with them. It's not a bad idea to search for lawsuits they've been in, to hire a private investigator for $1,500 or $2,000 to do a little bit of research. A lot of people are big liars when it comes to representing their skills and abilities and resources that they are bringing into the partnership. So especially if you're the person putting in the money, it's incumbent upon you to be as careful as you can possibly be. Someone said to me the other day, we were having dinner. It was actually like right before COVID. So we were having dinner and he said to me, he's like, Bradley, he said, in an ideal world, he said, what's the best client you could possibly get? What would you look for? If you could have any client in the world, what do you look for? And I said, I'd look for a partnership with 5 partners in it, because one person will usually be okay because they'll figure things out. When you've got 2 people, you've got a pretty good chance that they're going to have some kind of a problem and the partnership is going to end, but they'll figure it out. You get to 5 partners, there's no doubt in the world they're going to end up in litigation with each other, and it's going to be expensive and it's going to be a big job. I don't like that to happen. And that's why I'm giving this speech today, because I don't want to see that happen to you. But I want you to be warned that if you form a partnership with a whole group of other people, you're like, oh, the CFO should be a partner and the CTO should be a partner. In other words, the finance person and the technical person and the salesperson. Like all of us should be partners. Then you've got to go to the lawyer and you probably should form a corporation, and you need to have a really good shareholder agreement that deals with a lot of things, because every time you add another person to the mix, your chance of having problems goes up exponentially. All right. Keep that in mind. All right. Looks like another question or 2 just rang in. Okay, this one we already talked about. What about if you e-commerce as a service and not products? Well, you're still going to have people signing their service agreement with an entity. It's better if the entity is an LLC or a corporation than if it's just you. And you're going to have a contract that defines what risks you're taking on and what risks you're not taking on, and what service you're going to provide and what service you are not going to provide, to limit your liability. And if you're doing something dangerous, like practicing psychiatry, then you may also purchase insurance against something bad happening. But that's a service like any other service. If you deliver it online, you deliver it online. You may have to deal with issues of setting out jurisdiction, because you're going to be dealing with people in all 50 states, possibly other countries. But it doesn't change the fact that you're going to want to form a business entity and have a good contract to go along with it to keep yourself safe. Okay. All right. Okay. All right, so we talked about those things. All right, let's see. Which should be done. All right, so whether it's a corporation, you have a shareholder agreement, or whether it's a partnership and you have a partnership or a partnership agreement or an LLC, and you're going to have an operating agreement. Bottom line is these are long, complicated agreements that deal with all of the things that not all of the things, many of the common things that people end up going to court for, and they get dealt with while you're all on good terms. As soon as someone is discovered to be cheating on the business or something like that, it becomes impossible to negotiate anything. So you really want to get this figured out ahead of time. You should, right, then this just points out you should spell out the capital contributions of each partner, the duties and responsibilities. Now, a lot of times you've got one partner who's working full-time and others who are not. Those things should be separated out. Partners should have a certain amount of equity in the business, like a certain amount of voting rights, a certain percentage of ownership of the business based on whatever you decide it's going to be. If someone's going to be a paid employee, that's different. You can be a partner in the business and you get distributions of profits if there are any distributions. And separately from that, you get paid your hourly rate as an employee because you're an employee. And potentially there's not enough business to pay you, and so your salary may get booked as a loan against the business, which is to be repaid when the business raises capital or when the business becomes profitable. And so you might have a promissory note dealing with non-cash compensation for employee partners, but it really is better if you just recognize that someone's going to be an employee and they have an employment agreement, and when they don't do the job that they promised they were going to do because they're annoyed that you're sharing the profits equally and they're working harder than anyone, then you can turn around and you can fire them and you can hire a different employee, and they will remain a partner in the business because they earned their partnership however they earned it, but they're not going to be an employee anymore. That relationship is over. Another thing that's worth taking into account here is that people can be directly granted their ownership interest in the business, or there can be something known as a cliff and a vesting schedule. That means that you got 5 people, you've got a good employee, whatever the case may be, they're going to get an ownership interest, and you say you've got to perform before you become a full partner, because otherwise you're going to have all the ownership interest, but you may not be carrying your weight. And so for the first year, that person, or maybe everybody, doesn't get any ownership interest in the business. The business retains its ownership interest. And then over the next 4 years, 25% of the ownership interest attaches to each person on this vesting schedule. So after 5 years is over, you're a full partner if you've stuck around for the full 5 years. If you get voted out or leave prior to the first year, then you get nothing at all. And if you have an ownership interest and then you leave or you get voted out, it can be set up so that the business has the right to buy out your shares at a reasonable market value. You don't necessarily need to stay an owner forever. So, this is all complicated stuff. I deal with this, when you've got startups that have some good funding available and everybody is pretty sophisticated about everybody else's rights and contributions. And, you don't need to understand all this stuff. I'm just trying to throw it all out there just so you know that it can be done. All right. Let's see. We have Q&A here. I can see this call is being recorded. Will the recording be shared? I think that Taria already typed the answer to that in the Q&A. I'm not sure if it's going to be shared or it's not. That's Small Business Services is going to make that decision. The presentation will definitely be shared. All right, so I'm just not sure at this point. If you check the Q&A history, the answer might be in there. Otherwise, you can ask Taria afterwards. Okay. All right, evaluating a potential partner. As I told you before, there's a lot of liars out there. And frequently the money partner will come to me and they will say, Bradley, I need you to set up a partnership for me. And I say, okay, how do you know this person that you're going into business with? And they'll be like, we've been friends. We're fishing buddies. We've known each other since we were in the military together. We served in Iraq. Great. All the more power to you. But do you know this? Do you know if this person is going to pull their weight, or you're going to put $100,000 into the business and they're going to write themselves a salary check for $75,000 or a loan for $75,000 and you're going to lose it? Is this person an alcoholic? Is this person perpetually going bankrupt? Who are you going into business with? Just because someone's nice does not mean they're reliable and that they should be a partner. So what should you think about? These are the 3 C's. And this comes from the way banks make decisions about who they're going to lend money to. The first thing is character. Do you trust this person? Have you spent time with this person? Maybe you want to ask them for personal and business references. Capacity. Does this person have the time? Do they have the money? Do they have the technical abilities? Can they actually do this? There's so many people, they talk a big game and they deliver nothing. And that is so frustrating. So you really want to see some evidence that they have the capacity. And then do they have the commitment? Is this a person who's ever followed through on anything in their whole life? Or is this someone who quit school, then they quit their first job, then they quit their second job, then they quit their third job, then they got divorced, then they got married, then they got divorced, then they filed bankruptcy, then they got a job, then they filed bankruptcy? Listen, people have bad luck. I'm not making judgments. People have very bad luck, but that doesn't mean you want to go into business with that person. You might say, you know what? We're going to need a separate schedule. We're going to make a 5-year vesting schedule because I really just want to be sure. Or maybe it's better if you're an employee, or I don't know what, but once you do the background research, you may discover that the person you think you don't know. Now, how do you do these background checks? You can see if they have you can check on their professional credentials. In other words, maybe you're an architect. I have a lot of clients who are architects. And you're going to be going into business with an interior designer. You want to know, has this person had 12 ethics charges filed against them already? So you want to do a check on this person's professional credential. Do they even have this credential, or, has it been suspended? Next, check their financial assets and their credit history. A lot of times we find that someone has multiple bankruptcies. They have piles of unpaid tax debt. And you're like, whoa, this is scary. I don't want to do business with you. You're $200,000 in the hole to the IRS. You're going to steal from my company to pay the IRS, to keep yourself out of prison. I know what's going to happen, and I don't want anything to do with that. All right, history of lawsuits and judgments. Listen, if this person's been sued 5 times before, the customers are going to end up suing them, and they may be suing you as well. You may have to sue them. People who regularly are in lawsuits, be careful, okay? All right, summary of partnership types. You've got the general partner, the limited partnership, and we have here the limited liability company. You know, again, technically that's not a partnership, but it is a way for 2 or more people to do business together. And so in this chart that you can look at on your own time, we've got the ownership structure, we've got what kind of personal liability you have, and what's the tax treatment. I'm not going to talk about tax treatment right now because that gets complicated, all right? General partnership, okay. All right, so the lifespan of the general partnership, meaning just 2 people who were selling ice cream on the street corner, like no agreements, no nothing, it's for a designated period stipulated in the partnership agreement if you have one. Otherwise, if there's no partner agreement, it's until someone dies or someone walks away or someone doesn't feel like it. For purposes of taxation, a general partnership is not treated as a separate taxable entity. The business income is taxed through each general partner's personal tax return. So assuming we've each got 50% of the income and 50% of the losses, that's just a schedule on our personal tax return. Okay, as we talked about, personal liability is joint and several for the general partners. So in other words, if you're the money person and I'm the technical person, and I go and I just sign a contract for whatever it is, you are going to be liable as the money person for a contract that you may never have agreed to sign. I'm working on a lawsuit right now, but with partners where there were 3 partners, and one of the partners hired someone without telling the other partners, and now that person signed a bunch of contracts, and the person who signed those contracts with the rogue partner is now going to sue the partnership, and it's a mess. So, bottom line is you really want to be careful. These people had an LLC, so it's not as much of a mess. If it was a general partnership, it would be a horrible, terrible, no good mess. So, having an LLC with all your money wrapped up in it can still be a really bad mess. But if you have unlimited personal liability for the decisions made by someone that you may not even know that well, that's really a mess. So, okay. Okay, we have 2 questions. If someone has a lawsuit against them beforehand and you go into business with them and they get a judgment against them, could your business with them be liable as well, or only if you two formed a partnership? Good question, and that goes to asset protection. That is a unpleasant situation. What's going to happen? What's going to happen is the judgment is going to be executed against their share of the partnership. So they're going to gain the creditor is able to step into the shoes of the partner whose credit, I'm sorry, the creditor is going to step into the shoes of the partner who owns the asset, half the partnership or whatever it is. So yeah, you could end up in a partnership with the creditor. The creditor can't take your share because your share is your share and the creditor doesn't have a judgment against you, but the creditor can force a sale of the business. The creditor can potentially force a sale of the assets of the business. The creditor may gain the right to vote in your business. It depends on how that's why it's important to have a partnership agreement or a shareholder agreement or an operating agreement, because you structure it against creditors. When you set it up, you say if a creditor were to forcibly become a partner, then they would not have the right to vote and they would not have the right to force a sale of the business and stuff like that, because the creditor doesn't gain more rights than the partner whose interests they took over as. They stand in their shoes. So, so you can deal with that as long as you have a shareholder agreement or a partnership agreement. But if there's just no agreement, then, or if it's a bad agreement, then they can give you hell. It's really better that if they have an active judgment against them ahead of time, that you figure out a way to frustrate the ability of the creditor to just go right after that particular asset. And that's a separate discussion to have. You may form your business in another state. There's ways around it, but you do have to plan for that kind of thing. Does New York still require publishing your LLC in 2 local newspapers? Yes, they do. Is there a waiver for this for low-income people starting their first business? No, there's not that I know of. Usually the cheapest way to do this is you use a paralegal service. My favorite one is CorpNet. It's very responsive and it's very inexpensive. And they will give you their registered agent service for a year. Your registered agent service will be upstate New York, and then you will be asked to meet the publication requirement where the registered agent is upstate New York, where publishing in 2 newspapers is cheap, rather than doing it in New York where you're headquartered, where publishing in 2 newspapers is very, very expensive. It's still going to cost you a few $100s, even if you do this upstate New York, but it may be a few $1,000s if you don't take their registered agent service and you try to do this in New York City. A lot of people don't know about that, but that's certainly the better way to do it, and that's what people in the know do. All right, who are those service contracts written for? Your potential clients, the members of the LLC, and partners. I'm not sure which service contracts we're talking about, but contracts are going to be everyone should have a contract with anyone they're doing business with. The partners are going to have contracts with each other, which is going to be the partnership agreement in a partnership, the LLC, the operating agreement in an LLC, or the shareholder agreement in a corporation. Then the entity, meaning the LLC or the corporation or the partnership, is going to make a contract with customers, vendors, and so on and so forth. So anyone who's doing business with anyone is going to have a partnership with those people. They should. Is this just for a partnership or an LLC as well? I'm sorry, I'm just not sure what I was talking about at the time that you wrote this. If you want to clarify SC, then I'll be happy to answer. Oh, can I repeat the name of the service? CorpNet, CORPNET. You can also probably use LegalZoom or another paralegal service for this kind of thing, but CorpNet gives you a personal account manager whose name you have and who knows your name and who has a personal relationship with you. And they're much cheaper than CorpNet. I'm sorry, they're much cheaper than LegalZoom. So I just happen to really like CorpNet. I don't get anything by recommending them. I've just been using them for 10 years and I just really have been very happy with the service. So, but you can use whoever you want to use as long as they're willing to do this for you. So that's CorpNet. Also, any publishing an LLC waiver for people on unemployment. Maybe the law has changed and there is something like that. You could Google it or you could call the New York State Department of Corporations. I'm not aware of it. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just means I'm not aware of it. Is there a limited amount you have to publish your business in the newspaper? Yeah, what do they call it? The city clerks, the county clerk's office. The county clerk's office tells you which 2 newspapers you need to publish it in, and then you need to go ahead and call the newspaper and run the ad. CorpNet or whatever paralegal service you use will take care of this for you. Like they charge you an extra $75 or something like that for dealing with the county clerk. You still have to pay the cost of the newspapers, but they'll just tell you the total cost. They'll charge your credit card, then they'll go and they'll pay the newspapers and they'll make sure the ad runs. So that's what I do. If someone hires me directly to meet the publication requirement or form an LLC, that's how I do it. The publication requirement only applies to limited liability companies. It does not apply to corporations. The amount of time that the ad needs to run. I mean, there is, I don't know what it is. That's all information which is specified by the county clerk when it may come out of the limited liability company law. But regardless, the CorpNet knows, LegalZoom knows, and the county clerk knows. You can probably just Google it and find out as well. So yeah. It was about the original first question. You were saying the creditor could take over the portion of the partnership. Right, but I wanted to know if they could do that for an LLC. Yeah, absolutely. Whatever asset you own, a creditor can gain possession of that asset. So shares of a corporation are an asset. A membership interest in a limited liability company is an asset. An ownership interest in a partnership is an asset. A house is an asset. A patent is an asset. A trademark is an asset. Any right that you have is an asset that a creditor can levy on. There are certain exceptions to what they can't do, such as taking your salary. So, so if you have a business and you think that kind of thing may be happening, you may be able to make yourself an employee of the business and pay yourself a salary, and then that'll protect the first $600 a week in income from a creditor. And then after that, they can only take, I think it's like 25% of the money over $600 a week. So, there are certain things you can do, but, I'm not going to focus more on that right now. That's that. You can contact me separately and I'd be happy to go more into that. If your e-commerce business has registered agents in another state, why do you have to be registered? Why do you have to have a registered agent in New York State? Well, if you're not forming your business in New York State, then you don't need, then, and you're not doing business in, particularly in New York State, then no, you don't need to. You have your registered agent wherever it is that your corporation is formed. But if you live in New York State, if you've got a headquarters or an office in New York State and you have a foreign business that's not registered in New York State and doesn't have a registered agent in New York State, then you get what? Ding, 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 personal liability, because you're doing business as yourself. You're not registered in New York, but you're clearly working out of New York, so you're going to end up with personal liability. So if you have a major connection to New York, as I said before, your business headquarters is in New York. One of the partners or one of the top executives lives in New York. Whatever it may, anything major like that, then you probably should either register the business in New York or have a business registered elsewhere, but then foreign register the business in New York. Okay, what is my contact information? That's in the presentation, and Turia is going to mail the presentation around to everybody who is here at this workshop today. So you'll get my contact information in the presentation from Turia. If you don't receive it, just email Turia and ask her for it. You're welcome. You are welcome. Okay, so it looks like I just accidentally skipped a slide. Why can't I go back here? All right. General part, personal liability is joint and several. Okay, we talked about that. All right, how to form a general partnership. There's no paperwork required. You really should set out and make a partnership agreement, but if you don't have to do anything. You don't have to file anything with the government. If you can if you're going to use an assumed name, but you don't have to. A limited partnership. A limited partnership is an investment partnership. As we talked about before, it means you've got one head honcho who's really running the show, and then you have some investors. The limited partners are only liable up to the amount that they invested. A limited partnership does need to be registered with the state of New York. It's not hard to do. You file a certificate of limited partnership. Again, however, you've got to keep in mind that a limited partnership is a security under the Securities and Exchange Law. And if you just go and start accepting limited partnerships without qualifying, without making full disclosure of the risks and doing a private placement memorandum and stuff like that, then if the person loses their money and they go to the Attorney General or the SEC, you could end up being in prison for illegally issuing securities that you never even realized that you were doing. I dealt with this kind of thing recently where someone lost like $2 million. And I said, was this done as a private placement? Was there full disclosure of the risks? And she was like, no, none whatsoever. I said, call the Securities and Exchange Committee, send them to prison. Maybe that'll give them some motivation to pay back the money, since this person otherwise just filed bankruptcy. And they were like, ha ha, I just filed bankruptcy. You just lost your money. And I said to him, listen, tell him, yes, I just lost my money and you just lost your freedom. So I don't know, which do you value more? But, so you have to know about that kind of thing. A limited partnership. So a limited partnership is going to have a general partnership, and you're going to have limited partners as well. We talked about this stuff. We're talking about taxation of limited partnerships. A limited partnership is not a separate entity like an LLC or a C Corp. It's passed through taxation onto each partner's personal tax return. So the profits and losses of the enterprise are going to be passed through. So now, by the way, so you may be doing a small real estate project and they're like, are you serious? I need to deal with SEC stuff. And the answer is no, but just this person needs to be actively working in the business. They don't need to be actively, but they should be looking at the financial statements. They should be looking at the properties. There should be meetings once a week where they give their input. They have to be active, and then you don't need to worry about investment securities. But if they put in their money and they go to sleep and say, send me the money, when the time is right, then you could run into a problem. So it's really better if they're an active shareholder rather than purely an investor. if possible, unless you're going to take a bunch of investors, in which case you'll just do it the right way. Also, again, the partnership, a limited partnership also is going to have a lifespan, which is defined. It's going to be for a designated period as stipulated in the certificate of limited partnership, or until a dissolution event occurs, such as a limited partnership dying, withdrawing from the partnership, going crazy, whatever the case may be. So here's my contact information. Please remember, this presentation is for instruction purposes only. It does not create an attorney-client relationship. Okay, what time is it? So it's almost 5 o'clock. I also just would like to take a few minutes to talk about joint ventures and strategic alliances. I don't have slides for this here, but I'm going to give you some information about that. All right, let's first deal with our Q&A because that's a higher priority. Can we Google how to register a foreign business entity in New York? Oh, sure you can. If not, where can we get this information? Okay. First, you can Google that and you'll find resources on nolo.com that pop up and lots of other resources. Second, the New York State Department of Corporations, the New York State Department of State Division of Corporations is very helpful. They have people you call, you'll have to sit on hold half an hour, but they have people who answer the phone and they say, hello, New York State Department of State, Division of Corporations. My name is Bradley. How can I help you? And you say, hi, I'm Bradley, and I have a Delaware corporation. I have a Delaware LLC, and I would like to foreign register it in New York State. How do I do that? And they will say, thank you for calling the state, and thank you for asking us this question. Please go to the following link, and you will find the forms that you need to fill out to foreign register your foreign company in the state of New York. Or you can call CorpNet or LegalZoom or another paralegal service, and they will be happy for a nominal fee to do this for you. So those are 3 options that you've got for doing this kind of thing. All right, now let's hop into the chat window. Can you please type it here? What my contact information? It's on the screen right now. If that's what you mean, it's right there, and it's going to be there for a little while because I'm going to talk about some other things, and I don't have any more slides for those, so you'll see it for a little while. How much money at a minimum should we budget for getting our business started, i.e. legal fees, accountant fees for setting up an LLC, posting in 2 newspapers, looking for a range? Is it corp, or let me first answer HR. Is it CorpNet? Yes, it's CorpNet. Okay. Are those fees higher than having a registered agent in New York City? Well, you can be the registered agent. If you live in New York State, you can be the registered agent, and that's free. The only times you're going to use a paid registered agent is when you're trying to meet the LLC requirement. And so for the first year, you want to pay a registered agent who's located in the county where you want to meet the publication requirement. Or if you're located outside of the state, then you need a registered agent in the state. So then you're going to need to pay for registered agent service too. What is the registered agent's job anyway? The registered agent's job is to receive process service, is to get, when someone wants to sue your company, the registered agent is the person on file with the state of New York who stands up and says, if he or she hides out and the process server can't find him or her and can't sue them, then you just mail your lawsuit to the registered agent on file with the Secretary of State of the state of New York, and that will constitute valid service of the lawsuit on the company. So that's the purpose of the registered agent, is to make it easy for the company to be found when it needs to get sued, to make the company liable. That's the purpose. That's what the registered agent's job is. So other than receiving junk mail from companies that are like, oh, you just formed a business, you need an employee handbook or whatever it is that, that they're trying to sell you. So, all right. So okay, let me see what else. Let me just go to the top so I'm not skipping questions here. Okay. All right. So how much money at a minimum should we be budgeting to get the business started? That depends how much protection that you need. That's a very complicated question because it depends how much liability that you have and how much assets you have to protect and what you expect your business is going to be doing in the next 6 months to a year. I have people who contact me who are selling art at a flea market and they're like, what should I set up? I'm just like, nothing. Who's going to sue you? I mean, seriously, you're sitting at the flea market, you paint portraits and or you paint landscapes and you sell them at the flea market. Who's going to sue you? What liability do you have? Like, why would you might as well just be a sole proprietorship. On the other hand, I've got architects who come to me like, I'm worried that my buildings are going to fall down. If any of my buildings fall down, I could have $100 million in liability. Well, that architect is going to need insurance. The architect is going to want the most sophisticated structure possible set up to protect him or her. And in addition, maybe they're going to want to put their assets into irrevocable trusts or lock them up in Delaware corporations or Wyoming or Nevada corporations, or put them in Texas. I know it's hard. I mean, it really just depends on what are the risks that we're dealing with. That determines if you're gonna set up an LLC, then but like if you're just one person just trying to make a simple LLC setup, I don't know, maybe between $750 and $1,500, just depending on what paralegal service you use, what CPA you use. But I'd say that if you don't use a CPA at all, or you just find like a free CPA, then and you meet the publication requirement, then $750 to $900. No one's going to force you to meet the publication requirement, by the way. The law is that you cannot sue or be sued until you've met the publication requirement. And it's unclear whether you remain personally liable if you haven't met the publication requirement because you formed a defective company. But sometimes people are just like, listen, I really have no money, but I want to have an LLC just to look professional and apply for funding. And then if someone gives me the funding, I'll go ahead and I'll meet the publication requirement at that point. Then they may just choose to put off meeting the publication requirement and gaining the benefits that come with meeting the publication requirement until they believe that the company has a little bit of life to it. So, I don't recommend not meeting the publication requirement. It's not an authorized thing to do under the law, but that's just the way that the law works. If you're really not doing any business, then you may be like, I just don't even need to complete the process now of forming an LLC. And is that cheaper? Yeah, that's cheaper. Now it may only cost you $100 just to have that LLC name available to you. If you go and do the work yourself, you don't even use the paralegal service. So, okay. All right. That's what I mean regarding filing as a foreign entity fees versus LLC registration. Oh, no. Okay. If you're a foreign entity, it's going to cost you the same as if you had formed locally. I'm not sure if you need to meet the publication requirement if you're a foreign entity. You probably do, because it just doesn't logically make sense that you wouldn't need to, because the whole point of it is to put the public on notice that you're operating in New York. So I would think you would still need to meet the publication requirement. You can find out in 5 minutes by Googling it or by asking CorpNet or LegalZoom about it, or by, yeah, I mean, that's how I would do it. You're welcome. I keep hearing from professionals not to rush into getting your business registered because you'll have to do a lot of legal filing once you register. What does this entail? It depends what you register. Again, that's what we're talking about. If you form an LLC and you want to do it the right way, then it's going to cost you between $750 and $1,500, including the publication requirements. I had someone dealt with the whole kit and caboodle. It cost $950. He took the standard operating agreement that CorpNet gives you when you form an LLC. If there's more than one person in the business, or you think there's going to end up being a partner, you really should have a custom operating agreement made by a lawyer. You shouldn't just take the free operating agreement that they give you. But if it's just you in the business, then you may not care very much, and you may just take the free operating agreement. So, again, if you're not that concerned about the risks, but you still want to do it right, I'd say between $750 and $1,000. If you're an architect who's worried about your buildings falling, it's going to be way more. If you're raising capital, if you're putting in a lot of money, if you have multiple partners, then it can get a lot more expensive. But as I've mentioned, it's a continuum depending on how far along you are and how much risk you're willing to accept. And so it can be anything from a few $100s to a few $1,000s, depending on how sophisticated that you're looking to get. If someone tells you and also you're probably going to do the S corp election for your LLC, so your accountant is not going to need to file a separate tax return. It's just going to be your business income and losses is just going to be a schedule on your existing tax return. So if you're getting the free tax preparation service, you may not even be paying anything for that. So it doesn't have to be complicated. That's the short answer. Like with anything else in life, it just depends on how serious you are about it. If you want to get into scuba diving, how expensive is it going to be? Depends how serious you are. You can buy the coolest gear in the world, or you can probably just rent someone's gear for $20 and get someone to volunteer to give you a lesson, and you'll see how you like it. It's just more fun and it's cooler to do it the expensive way and get all the bells and whistles. But that doesn't mean you have to do it the fun, cool way. You can do it the broke person's way. Where can we find small business CPAs? Okay, well, the first thing is I believe there are classes that CPAs teach through New York City Small Business Services, the same way that I teach law services. I think there are CPAs who teach for small business services too. And anyone who teaches for New York City Small Business Services is a fine professional, and I recommend them highly. No, I mean, seriously, that is one way that you can do it. You can also Google around, and you can Google small business CPA, and you can look for people who've written articles online, who have teaching credentials, who have a LinkedIn that shows that they're really committed to this kind of thing, and they have history and experience doing it. What else you can do? I can recommend to you a small business CPA that I work with on a regular basis and I know quite well, and I know she does good work. So you can look at people's reviews on Yelp or on Google. So, those are the typical ways that you can do it. You can ask other people that who's their CPA, right? If there are good small business owners that you can say, hey, are you happy with your CPA? If so, who is it? Would you mind giving me an introduction? So, that's the way I like to do things. So, okay, what else? I've had an LLC for about 9 months now, and I didn't publish in the newspaper because I didn't have the funds at the time. Can I do it now through CorpNet? Sure, absolutely. As I mentioned before, you can meet the publication requirement anytime that you feel like it. It's a defective LLC until you do it, but sure, you can call CorpNet and they'll take care of it for you right now. Can you change the operating agreement later? Absolutely, you can change it 100 times if you want to. For example, if it is just you, then as your business grows, you get a partner. Sure, you can totally do that. But it may be that you're going to find a partner and you're going to be all excited, and then you're going to first go to have a new partnership agreement or operating agreement drafted, and then the lawyer comes back with a whole bunch of questions for you to answer to figure things out. And and then the partner's saying, well, what's happening? And then you tell them I'm forming it. They say, well, I want to be part of that. Let me know what the questions are. Whereas if there's already an operating agreement in place, then you just say, hey, here's the operating agreement. I just need you to sign on to it. And so unless the person has specific issues, typically they're going to just sign on to what is already there. But if you're first creating it when they're there, it's going to delay the process, and it may give them more of a say than you really want to give them. But if you don't have the money, then yeah, you can take a stock operating agreement. And when you have more money, you'll make a better operating agreement. So, I'm just not a big fan of putting things off into the future because usually it just never happens. Can you create an anonymous LLC in New York City to protect your identity? Oh boy, typically corporations are used for that purpose. I'm just trying to think of like how that works. You can be anonymous. Um, Usually corporations are the preferred method for being anonymous. A lot of times overseas people who don't really have the right to be doing things here form corporations because it's relatively easy to form an anonymous corporation. However, banks and financial institutions have something called the know your customer requirements. And other institutions also sometimes have know your customer requirements. And so even though you successfully anonymously formed a corporation, when you try to register for a bank account or collect a large wire or engage in other financial transactions, you may find that you run headfirst into the know your customer rules, and then your money gets held or your corporation loses its bank account, or you get reported to the government because they're going under the know your customer rules. They're going to ask for a list of who are the large shareholders, and a bunch of other things too they may ask. But you're not scot-free just because you form an anonymous one. Now, if you want to have an anonymous LLC, Nevada is well known for that. Wyoming is well known for that. Texas is well known for that. Um, Delaware, I believe, also is very, very friendly towards people who are looking to protect their privacy. I can't think offhand of why it's not anonymous in New York. I think they may have passed a new law recently that requires definitely LLCs and potentially corporations formed in New York to meet a higher standard for disclosure. There's still things people can do, like they can form a Delaware LLC that then goes and forms a New York LLC or a New York corporation, and then the disclosure is simply of the corporate shareholders of the New York corporation. So, I'm not exactly sure how to do it because it's not something I typically do. But if it's something that matters to you for a variety of reasons, and they're not all illegal, people do it because they're wealthy and they want to buy real estate without people being like, oh my God, Taylor Swift is the purchaser, and then the price triples because it's Taylor Swift, and, stuff like that. So celebrities use that kind of thing. And so it probably can be done, but exactly how to do it, I would need to just do a little bit of research. I'm not sure immediately what needs to be done to have anonymity when you purchase real estate or whatever else you're doing, but it absolutely can be done, and celebrities do it as a matter of conducting business, that they don't get ripped off at every possible instance. And wealthy overseas buyers do that as well, just to protect their anonymity, since sometimes they're using money from offshore accounts that they shouldn't be using, and all that other good jazz. So if you're purchasing real estate, exactly. Oh, right. You're bringing this up specifically. If you're purchasing real estate or another company, but you want to protect, yeah, absolutely. I'd need to look into how you can do it, but yeah, this is how celebrities do it, in fact. So, all right, let's see. So I don't see more questions posted there. I see more things have popped up in the Q&A. Okay, how does one deal with an LLC formed in New York, but then one moves out of state, such as California? You either foreign register your New York LLC in California, and then you're paying taxes twice. You're paying taxes in New York, and you're paying, or you may be able to deal with some of the tax issues, but you're paying the franchise tax in California and the corporation tax in New York. So you're going to be paying more government fees if you're registered in both places. But if your company has good credit, or you think you may come back to New York, or you've still got an office in New York, or you're manufacturing in New York, or, whatever it may be, your partner lives in New York, then you may have a reason to just keep your New York entity, but foreign register elsewhere. If you've just had it with New York and you're planning to go to somewhere warm and sunny that doesn't have state income taxes, then you're going to dissolve your New York LLC and you're going to form a new LLC in your new home state. Did I answer the question? Does one have to reform another LLC and dissolve the former one? Yeah, I mean, either you're going to foreign register in another state, or you're going to dissolve and form a new one elsewhere and lose your excellent credit that you've built up. That you've built up. And that can actually be annoying. I had a situation like that with Chase where it was actually for a company that I owned, because I'm an entrepreneur as well as a small business attorney. I work as a small business attorney full time, but I used to be co-founder and general counsel of a group of successful companies. And so we had a company and we had a few $1 million in revenue, and we dissolved it and we formed a new company for legal reasons. And Chase pulled our revolving line of credit, and they wouldn't give us a nickel in credit. Even though our revenues were better than ever before, we had millions in revenues, Chase would not give us a red cent in credits. And they said the reason is because you need to be a Chase customer for 2 years before we can extend you credit. It's our underwriting guidelines. And I said, but I've been a Chase customer for 10 years. And they said, no. They said, you personally maybe, but you're not the one who's seeking the line of credit. Your company that's only been in existence for 3 days is seeking a line of credit, and that company is separate from you, and they've only been a Chase customer for 3 days, and the excellent customer that we used to have has been dissolved and is no more. And I was like, come on, you can't just carry over the relationship from one company to the next. You can see it's the same receivables and same owners, so on and so forth. And they said, nope, can't do it. So, that kind of messed us up. And so you do have to kind of keep in mind that, you're losing all of the excellent credit history that you may have built with your previous company. But, if it's worth it to you, then it's worth it to you. Okay. Okay. If your business is registered in another state and you register, or foreign register in New York, do you pay taxes in both states? Probably not. You're probably going to pay taxes on the income that you earned in state X and state X, and the income you earned in state Y and state Y. But there's certain minimum corporate or franchise taxes that are imposed simply as a function of the company's revenue, no matter where you earn the money. And so, yeah, I mean, in California, I think it's a minimum of like $1,500. In New York, I'm not sure what it is. It's based on your revenue. But you're going to pay some level of taxes just for being registered here, even if you're not doing anything else. Income taxes, and corporate taxes is you're not going to pay twice. Your CPA will probably get it figured out so that you're paying one state or the other, but not both. But there's still going to be that carrying cost that I talked about. Okay. All right. All right, let me just quickly dismiss what I have here, so I don't get confused. All right, so that's the Q&A. All right, where can we find? Okay, all right. So I think that I've addressed anything. If I missed anyone's question, then please just let me know, and I will and I'll take it up again. All right, let's see what we have here. Very informative. I appreciate it. Oh, I appreciate you having the confidence in me and Small Business Services to come today. Okay. What else do we have here? All right, since there's no more questions blinking at the moment, I was just going to quickly talk about joint ventures and strategic alliances. So strategic alliances are pretty cool. You don't hear much about it, but strategic alliances are very, very cool. I once was speaking with I was once looking at a strategic alliance between a major art dealer and art consultant and a highly in-demand sculptor. And a strategic alliance means that you're not forming a new business together as partners, but you simply sign a contract that you're both going to do or not do certain things in order to create a greater profit for the two of you. So what these two were doing was, this art consultant was trying to get more major Fortune 500 corporate art consulting clients, and the sculptor was trying to sell more sculpture to the Fortune 500. So the art consultant and the sculptor made a deal where the sculptor would only sell his sculptures to the Fortune 500 through this particular art consultant. And this art consultant would recommend this particular sculptor's sculpture before trying to recommend anybody else's, any other sculptor's work. And the art consultant was trying to do this with a whole bunch of top sculptors and fine artists and stuff like that. And so both of them were seeking to lock up the major corporate art market by doing this, because because then this particular art consultant is going to say, well, if you want to buy from from sculptor 1, sculptor 2, painter 1, painter 2, you can only buy it through me. And I'm the exclusive agent. And then when people are not asking, they say, I just want to see some sculpture. They say, well, listen, there's 100 people who could make your sculpture, who have nice sculpture for what you're looking for, but really I can get you a special discount on investment grade, highly popular sculpture by this particular sculptor. And so, the art buyer for the corporation is like, great, listen, if you can get me special 20% off on it, and it's investment grade, and it's going to get us in the press because it's well known, and and it's going to be part of a limited collection, then sure, give it to me. So that's a joint venture, and you can do it with a lot of things too. Like say you make like really nice dog coats, you could make a joint venture with a pet store that you only sell your coats online or through this particular pet store, and then the pet store carries your coats at their store. That drives more people to the store, and so they like it, and it helps you make sales because it's a popular pet store and they're selling your stuff. So you're not really making a partnership, you're just agreeing that you're going to partner in a very limited capacity. So that's what that is. Okay, all right, so these are questions, that was a question for Taria. Who does a strategic alliance have to be disclosed to? Well, a strategic alliance, unlike a joint venture, a strategic alliance is when two companies get together and form a third company. They do it for the purpose, for a limited purpose, like bidding on a very large contract. Like, marketing companies may do that. Like say, for example, Ford is looking to hire an ad agency. And they want to cover billboards, and they want to cover SEO, and they want to cover creative design for ad buying and stuff like that. Maybe like a major Madison Avenue company can do that, but you might have 3 really good regional companies that are going to get together, and one focuses on print and billboard, and one focuses on radio and television, and one focuses on digital. And so they're going to get together and form a joint venture for the purpose of bidding on this contract with Ford. And they're going to disclose with Ford who are the members and who's doing what. You have to do it, but it's going to give Ford the confidence that they can handle this, and they're going to break up the contract and administrate it. And it allows smaller regional companies to bid against major national companies. So, you can find on a more limited basis a time that you want to do a joint venture. You don't want to personally make a partnership, but you will create a new company with another company just for the purpose of doing one particular thing. So when there's know your customer rules, then anyone who's enforcing the know your customer rules will, is going to know who the members of the strategic alliance are. Also, anyone who asks is going to find out. Like if you're bidding with Ford, Ford's going to be like, well, explain to me, how are you going to do this? And so then you're going to be compelled to tell Ford who are the members, and you'll want to tell Ford who are the members of the strategic alliance, but you create the strategic alliance just so you've got one company that can be the bidder and can sign the contract with Ford. So, because they're just going to be like, who do I wire the $1 million to, or the $10 million to? And so you want to have someone who can open a bank account and sign a contract with Ford. So that answers that question. I'm not going to dismiss the one for Taria because that's for her. And then someone says it's an LLC in an online business that's registered in another state, but you say that it would be prudent to register in New York. Okay, so will I have to pay tax in both states? If it's an LLC, not a corporation, a small amount of taxes probably, but if it's structured properly, you won't have to pay double. You're going to pay where you earn the money. But to make sure you structure it correctly, you're going to want to go to the CPA for that, rather than asking the lawyer, because tax questions unless you're dealing with a tax lawyer, which there are tax lawyers out there, but the CPA is cheaper because a tax lawyer is a highly specialized professional and it's a very basic question for a CPA. So I would just ask my typical small business CPA about that. Okay, that was the Q&A. Q&A is lit up, but okay, here, let me see, chat. Okay, all right, you are welcome. So I think that we've talked about everything. I gave you some examples of joint ventures and strategic alliances. Those are business partnerships. And it's just a cool thing to know about because a lot of times someone may be very successful and they're not going to go into business with you. They're not going to form a partnership, but you can say, hey, how about a joint venture? And, but okay, give me a proposal. I can do that. That's a lot easier for me to do than fully forming a partnership. If you've got any kind of a strategic asset to offer me, then I will take it. Okay. All right. Someone says, I'm building an online app-based company to connect customers with services they seek. Example, booking an at-home massage. After registration as an LLC, setting up a company bank account and getting an EIN. Are there any continuous costs that I should be mindful of before actually being able to focus on making sales? I mean, I don't know exactly what the business is doing. I mean, you can Google for a budget for the kind of business that you're doing, or if there's not one, get one that's similar. Usually, I'm not a small business advisor, but sometimes I do that for friends just as a favor. They're like, Brad, can you just tell me how to do this business? And I'll be like, yeah, sure, just because I know how to do everything. So I'll just tell you how to do your business. But, usually what I tell people is if you have no idea what this is going to cost you, you should probably just Google around for a budget for this kind of a business or put an ad on Craigslist and find someone who's been a bookkeeper or a CPA for this kind of business to just give you a budget so that what is this kind of thing, what has this kind of thing cost other people for their first year in business or their second year in business, but it does not have to cost you much. At the end of the day, you can trade time for money. You can do almost everything for free or for very low cost if you're willing to sit in front of Google long enough, right? You can form your own LLC. You can, and the publication requirement, if you're assuming you're going to meet that, that's going to cost you a few $100s. You probably don't, you can check from the New York City website to see what kind of a business license you're going to need. You may need a tax collector's permit if there's a service tax that applies to the things that you're selling, but you can probably structure your contract in such a way that you don't have to, you're not collecting the money. So therefore you don't need to collect the taxes. You simply receive a fee from the out of the transaction, but the sale is made by the seller, and so you're not responsible to collect the taxes. That would be a legal question I would need to research, is how do you structure it so that you're not the seller, you're simply a middleman with no duty to collect taxes. But you're going to have marketing costs if you're going to market, but if you're going to do everything yourself and you're just not planning to spend any money, then you don't need to spend any money. You might just need to accept more risks. It's really just depends on your budget. You can do it for zero or almost zero if that's what your budget is. Anything can be done. It's just more of a pain in the butt, but it can be done. Okay. Right. So, we could talk more privately about what it is that you're going to do and, what are the legal risks that are associated with it. And then you're going to incur accounting, legal, and incorporation fees in line with the risks you have in terms of the assets that you've got in the bank and in your name and the chance of getting sued that you think you're going to have. The minimum cost you have is just government compliance. You want to make sure that you're structured correctly. So you might incur, $1,000 to $2,000 in legal research fees just to confirm that you're not violating city, state, or federal laws when you do this kind of a business. But yeah, I mean, it's really up to you how much security you're willing to pay for. Right. So I'm the middleman connecting customer to service. Okay. So you can see, by the way, a cheap way to do it is to find someone else who's already doing something similar to you and download their contract and read it and see if their contract applies equally well to you. That doesn't mean that they've got everything figured out. They might be doing something which is defective and illegal, but if it's a major company based in New York, then they're probably not doing something defective and illegal. They're probably doing something which is usable by you. So, a lot of times as an attorney, that's how I get started too. If it's something I'm not familiar with, I'm like, what's PayPal doing, or what's eBay doing, or whatever, what's similar and what are they doing? And then I look at their contract and then I read it over. And I say, does this apply correctly to my client, or is this somehow really only relevant to a Fortune 500? And so, that's a good way to do it. Are there resources? Well, a lot of times the terms of service are right online. Like if it's PayPal or eBay, they're not going to mail you a contract. When you sign up for the service, they're going to make you read the contract and sign it right on the spot. It may just be called the terms of service, or there may be an additional supplemental agreement you need to sign. But if you go and you sign up for the service, they're going to put their contract right in front of your face. So, you're going to be able to download it without a problem. Thank you. Thank you for saying that I'm amazing. Service I try to provide for people is I try to give them ideas, because lawyers are a dime a dozen, but people who think creatively and help get the job done cost effectively and intelligently, that's where the value is created. So I do strain myself to try and provide some value rather than just stamping papers, which anyone who gets out of law school can do. So, but again, the compliment means a lot to me. Do we have other questions? Oh, yeah, okay. Let's see. Do you need to register as a foreign entity in other states if you're charging and doing small online events? Well, I mean, it depends what you're doing. Do you mean that you're doing online that you're creating online events that are going to be like meetups where you arrange it online, but then they're going to be meeting in the state? I mean, it depends. We'd really need to look at exactly what you're doing. Basically, if you're doing a lot of business there, and usually you're foreign registering in a state when one of the partners or top executives lives in that state, when you're incorporated in that state, or when you have an office or a headquarters in that state, or when you're doing a very substantial amount of business in that state. Those are the general rules about when you're going to foreign register. If you've got something like Meetup and people from Nevada can use your service to create a Nevada meetup, or you've got like an online flea market that someone in Nevada can do, I'm not sure that I would incur the cost of, but otherwise, you have no connection to Nevada. I'm not sure that I would incur the cost of foreign registering in Nevada over that. It's just not that much of a connection to the state. So the criteria that I just laid out, those are the things that I would look into to determine whether I'm going to want to foreign register. If you're charging, listen, I mean, you're going to be doing, if you have an online business, you're going to be charging people all over the world. So you can't afford to be registered in all 50 states and all 326 countries, or however many countries there are. There's got to be, a common sense limit on when it is that you need to be registering in that state. And, the line is the things that I mentioned, when there's a real substantial connection to that state or that country. So, we need to evaluate is there a real substantial connection beyond mere happenstance that could just be equally true from all 50 states? Are there any particular legal business setup considerations for an internet-based food business? Well, you're talking about two different things here. You're talking about food business and you're talking about internet-based. Food businesses, it depends if you're a home processor, in which case you need a home processor registration, home processing registration, or whether you're going to be renting space in a commercial kitchen, which already has the necessary permits set up for you. if you're doing home-based food processing, then there's going to be licensing and sales requirements about what you can do and what you cannot do and when. If you're processing at a shared commercial kitchen, then you need to look up what the rules are for that, but there's going to be less rules. Once you're in compliance with New York's food processing rules and the FDA's food labeling rules, and I'm not sure if there are any New York State food labeling rules, but if there are, you should Google that and make sure you're in compliance. Now, if you're using a commercial, a shared commercial kitchen, a lot of times they're what's known as a co-packing facility, meaning that they bundle everything together for you. Like they'll handle the labeling requirements for you. They'll handle packaging and manufacturing of your food product. They'll handle shipping. So, a lot of people end up just going with that because, the processor will just handle everything for you in one shot. So it's just easier to do it that way. Internet-based, again, it just depends where you're selling and who you're selling to. And are you selling wholesale? Are you selling retail? You may need a tax collector's certificate if you're dealing out of New York State or you're selling to consumers in New York State. I'd need to look into it, but you probably do need a tax collector's certificate. If you're selling online to people in New York State, they call that a tax authority. But again, I'm not sure of that. I would just need to Google it. In the worst case, call the New York State Department of Taxation and Finance to confirm the answer. Okay, love this presentation. Thank you, LaToya. Do I need an operating agreement for my LLC? Yes, you do. If you don't want a good one, you can take the free one that they give you with CorpNet, or you can just download one for free on Google. But yes, you need one. It's illegal to have an LLC without an operating agreement. And if you get into a lawsuit, your LLC can be struck down for failure to comply with the legal requirement of having an operating agreement. You don't need to file one, so no one knows when you made it. But if you get caught without an operating agreement, you're in trouble. If you can afford it, always better to have a lawyer make you a good operating agreement, but at a minimum, just meet the legal requirement by having some operating agreements. Do I help with that? Yes. That's one of the basic things that I do, is create the agreements, is create the basic agreement or the agreement between partners or shareholders. So living in New York State would be considered a substantial connection. Heck yeah, in New York State, if you're conducting an online business. Absolutely. Like if not New York, where? Yes. If you live in New York State, then you should be forming your business in New York State. Or if you formed it in Delaware to make the investors happy, then you should foreign register in New York State. Let's see, do we have other things here? Let's see what's in the chat window. Thank you for the compliment, Lauren. From Tari, likewise, thank you so much. Bradley, you're actually personable, fun to listen to, and really explain away thank you, Tari. It means the world to me, that because I'm sitting here speaking to an abyss. Before COVID, we used to have a classroom full of people and we'd have a lot of fun. We would have all these interactions, but now we're in a totally different format and it's just me speaking to the ceiling. So it really does mean the world to me when people tell me that you're hearing and understanding, and I'm not just talking to myself. Have you done operating agreements with real estate investors? Yeah, absolutely, all the time. Like you set up a real estate investment LLC and you need to have an operating agreement saying what each person's investment is going to be and when they get paid out and what are the rights. Absolutely, that's core small business law. And also when you're raising capital, if they're not all active investors and you need to do a private offering to raise capital for the LLC from accredited investors or even from non-accredited investors, from friends and family, then, or if you're going to take loans, then yeah, for all those things, I do the legal paperwork for real estate investing. It's one of the big things that folks do around here in New York City, is investing in real estate. So looks like someone else. Thank you again. And this is a wonderful presentation. It's so wonderful and informative. Thank you, anonymous attendee. I really appreciate it. All right. Do we have anything else? Going once? Going twice?
I have something.
All right.
I'm just kidding. It's Taria, everybody. Hello, and Bradley. That was pretty great. Very interactive, just how I know you like it. So awesome. I'm glad that was a great session.
Yeah, this was like the best session ever because people were so interactive. I think this was my favorite presentation, at least since COVID started.
Yeah, I agree. So, everyone, thank you so much for your attendance today. You should have Bradley's information. Is that like the part 2 of the presentation, Bradley? Oh, nice.
I found the couch with a table.
Hey,
Yes,
I
here
remember that.
we have a visitor here.
My
Hi,
name is
visitor. I
Riel.
remember My Little Pony.
Yeah, like two ponies visited us,
Oh my goodness.
and a little girl have visited too. So.
Nice.
All right.
Great. Well,
Her name is Princess Celestia and Princess Kay.
so, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your participation today. And I'm going to keep going, Bradley. So everything will be shared with you. Wait, are we getting? What was that message? Okay. So nonetheless, you guys are all going to get a copy of today's presentation along with whatever helpful resources were mentioned today. Just note that the recording is done on Bradley's side. We don't normally record. So Bradley, do you want folks to reach out to you, or do you want to send the presentation to me and I share it? Like,
you're talking about the recording?
The recording of today's webinar?
I will, I'll send it to you and then you can make the decision about whether you're going to share it or whether you're not going to share it. I suppose.
I was going to just leave it all up to you, but I mean.
All right, well then people can reach out to me and I'll send it to anyone who who emails me and asks them for a copy of it, assuming that my recording worked fine. When I, once I log off, it's going to ask me if I want to save it. So I'm assuming that I have a recording. Assuming that I do, then I'm happy to put it on Dropbox or Google Drive and share it with anyone who wants it.
Awesome. Okay, so I'll make sure if they haven't already copied your contact information to share it with everyone along with the resources today. And I believe that will be all. We have a few more sessions on the calendar, so looking forward to that. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Just keep an eye out for an email from me, folks. This is Taria again with the Brooklyn Chamber. And yeah, I'll let Bradley close everything out, and you guys can start to dismiss yourselves thereafter.
All righty. Goodbye. Goodbye, everybody.
That was sweet.
Oh, I didn't know you wanted me to say anything more than that. I've been blabbering for so long already. If anyone wants a free consultation, if you have questions, I know I talked about a lot of very complicated things. As I mentioned, you're welcome to go ahead and I will be happy to talk to you and go into more detail on whatever it is that you want me to go into more detail about. And
I would like to add that before you do any one-on-ones, that they can contact me so I can share that intake form with them, just so we can kind of keep a accurate track of, who's in the class and people are actually, we can communicate to the city that, hey, people are actually using our services, so that would probably be the better channel. And I'll email that to everyone. Well.
Okay, yeah, all right. So if you want to do the free consultation, the free one-on-one, then you should do that. You should book that through Taria.
Because we offer those services at no cost, so that'll be a good way to say, hey, we are servicing Brooklyn. All right, so great. So as I said, you can start to dismiss yourselves, folks. And
I have a quick question, sorry, before we. Hello?
Hi, I'm here.
I'm assuming Mr. Bradley.
It's just yeah, I would love to have a consultation. I will contact you to here, but I would have to know for the operational agreement, do you charge for that?
Yeah, that's a really serious complex agreement, an operating agreement. That's the core of the limited liability company. So yeah, that takes at least 3 to 5 hours of legal time.
Okay, so I will contact you.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so I guess we're all set then, right? I think we're all set. We've answered the questions. I'm going to log off now.
Okay, Bradley. So we'll be in touch, and I replied to your email too. So just follow up if anything, and otherwise we'll convene soon.
All right, be well, everyone. Thank you for attending.
To you the same. Thanks, Bradley.